Well, good morning, everybody. It's good to be back talking with you all. Thank you for giving me a few days off just to kind of just take some paid time off and relax with my family and usher in this new year. It's interesting, by the way. Today is January 5th, but the satellite image you're looking at is January 4th. So this was Sunday. And Sunday is a very unique day. January 4th is a very unique day every single year because that is the day of the year when the Earth, in its orbit around the sun, is actually closest to the sun. We're farthest from the sun on July the 4th and closest on January 4th. And the reason we're in winter, though, is pretty easy to see with this line right here. That line kind of tells us the angle at which the sun's light is striking the Earth. And if you kind of have a look at it, draw a perpendicular line to it, that's clearly going to be pointing into the southern hemisphere where the sun's rays are much more direct this time of year. That's why it's so much cold right now. But as I watch this animation, what do we see? We see another system going across the northern tier of the United States, right? We've watched really epic lake effect snow come off of each of these big snows across the northern tier of the U.S., like the North Woods region. We then watch bigger systems come into the west, and that's been the way it's been since Christmas, just large storm systems coming into the west. And each one of them has kind of missed the midsection of the country. And this has been an ongoing story that we're going to have to keep an eye on. And you know what I'm going to say, because we talk about it all the time. We need to get a trough to come over the southern Rockies to eject into the southern plains to open up the Gulf and deliver moisture to this area. And instead, we've seen repeated storm systems come through here, or like we saw, between Christmas and New Year's, a pretty monstrous snowstorm that went here into the North Woods of Wisconsin and Minnesota. That was a sizable storm that came through, but they're not getting far enough to the south. And so as a result, we've expanded the area since December 1st over which we're seeing record dryness. Now, when I say record, our records are back to 1893. Again, that's what I love about this map from Iowa State. And everywhere it's got that 133 in it is now the new driest from December 1 to January 4th, that time period compared historically on record. Now, meanwhile, we've seen much better snowpack arrive in the western United States. It's not where we want it to be in the Colorado Basin. It's not where it should be across parts of Northern California and across much of the Intermountain West, but it is better than what it was. We watched in December a lot of flooding in the Northwest. We've seen multiple systems come through Idaho and Montana, but my eye just continues to focus on these really, really dry areas that extend throughout much of the central and southern plains, over through the Delta into the mid-south, and extending at times all the way to the East Coast. Now, these same storm systems, which dip in through here, if they continue along a southerly track, they can run up the East Coast, giving us a big nor'easter. We've been avoiding, that particular pattern as well. So last 30 days, this is a percent of normal precipitation graph, and there's a lot of zeros here. We've watched drought expand significantly, and it's actually pushing farther and farther to the east. If you want to look at the actual anomalies, according to the AHPS, which is part of NOAA's data collection resources, we can see some of these areas are 4 to 5 inches off of average, a lot of 3 inches off average. And that may not seem significant because we've seen summer thunderstorms undo this, right? You can get a summer thunderstorm that puts down 2-3 inches in 6-7 hours. But the question we're going to be asking is, how much longer does this last? And what does it look like by the time we arrive into that spring time frame when the rains should be revived in this area? All right, because the soil moisture is still quite depleted. This is a look at yesterday on January 4th, the soil moisture maps. NASA hadn't updated them yet this morning for the 5th as I was recording this, but we've watched this area expand. All right, now it's been quite wet here. A lot of snow in the like I said, in the upper Midwest, getting into Ontario, huge snows here, big lake effect events, and these large storm systems producing at times catastrophic flooding in parts of California. By the way, California's reservoirs right now, 125% of historical average. They're all above their historical average, and we've put down quite a bit of snow in the mountains, which I'm going to show you in just a few moments here. But I want to come back to the central U.S. because this morning the Mississippi River is still, 2.38 feet below low stage. A year ago, we were 12 feet above low stage here. And we've just been kind of bumbling along well below this line, which is right here designating what low stage is at Memphis. Now, little surges that have happened have primarily come from some snowmelt. We've watched quite a bit of snow come through the Midwest into the Ohio Valley. Big, again, lake effect events have been just incredible to watch. We've even seen some good snows push up against the Appalachian Mountains here in Virginia and West Virginia, which has been helpful to the drought situation in that area. But what's come down the river has primarily been from melt here. Very brief thunderstorm events have swept through this area recently, but overall it's been from snow melt from this, okay? Now, the pattern, I think this is what we just need to learn here. When you go back from the beginning of December up until right before Christmas, this dominant ridge was the mainstay in this pattern. That ridge kind of shoved flow over the top, came around like this, entered into Washington, dove into the northern United States, and exited through the northeast. The Bermuda High, at least if you look at where its companion high pressure is in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, is shifted east. We even got some nice cross-polar, I don't know if you want to call this like bridging of high pressure from Scandinavia through the Arctic. And that's what's helped drive just repeated shots at colder air here. Now, again, this was the larger ridge that kind of just opened and flexed into the midsection of the country for most of December. Toward the end of December, it changed, though. That high-pressure cell built a little bit farther to the west, and that allowed for a low to start to form off California's coast. And that's what's been driving the repeated storm systems into the western United States. But it's pushed this ridge into the central U.S. here that was once over the southwest, making for very mild conditions showing up here and also extremely dry. So that's what's happened from the last week, I should say, of 2025. Now we're going to look at the new pattern. Well, we're going to look at any adjustments to the pattern in just a few moments. But these big lows that have been off the coast have really soaked California. So I mentioned the reservoir numbers a moment ago, but I want to show you two other things. This is the total precipitation over the last 2 weeks. And this is all snow, of course, here, but the liquid equivalent is approaching 14 inches. So, I mean, if you just multiply that by 10, we're talking 140 inches of snow, and in some places much, much more than that at the highest peaks. But this has caused a lot of flooding, especially down here towards Southern California, really right along the coast here. The Pacific Coast Range amplifies the flow coming off and gives us these pretty terrible flooding events that can come through this particular region. Now, as I mentioned, a lot of this is snow. I'm going to show you something kind of neat. This is what's called worldview.earthdata.nasa.gov. It's a great website. You can look at a lot of different satellites, and these are low Earth orbiting or polar orbiting satellites. And I brought you back to December 13th because I wanted you to see the Thule fog, which was here, and I wanted you to see the snow over the Sierra Nevada. Now, if I go back to the last clear day we had, which was December 29th, take a look at the snow difference. All right. That fog is still there. That low cloud is still throughout much of the Central Valley, getting all the way down to Southern California here. Parts of it, the southern part of the Central Valley. But if you go back and forth, just look at the differences in the snow here. Now, further into the interior, we've been waiting on getting better snows in parts of, ski country in Utah and Colorado. And I was checking in on the Colorado basin. Let's go do that real quick. Colorado. Here's their snowpack graphic. I get this to pull up here relatively quickly. There it is. And that dark blue line right there is where we are. And by the way, I've not been shopping for speakers. So that's an interesting advertisement there. But that's where we currently sit, about 2/3 of the 30-year average on the Colorado basin. So just another important number to kind of point out as we take stock of where we are in this new year. Now, I mentioned the lake effect snow, and over the last 2 weeks, we can see these areas which have picked up just a tremendous amount of precipitation in the form of lake effect snow. And take a look at almost all of New York in the last 2 weeks. 2 to 4, some places almost up to 5 inches of liquid equivalent. This area's got a lot of snow on it. You've probably seen some of the pretty incredible images of lake effect snow bands here. Now, what's been supporting this has been the colder air that has been able to find its way through this corridor at times. But because most of December, which is what this map is showing, this is December 1 through January 4th, has had a ridge that started here or opened up here. Much of the western plains, through the Four Corners states, the Great Basin, all the way out west, has seen warmer conditions. Now, we've watched this warmer air just peel off and go through the United States. In fact, Christmas Day was one of the warmest Christmases on record as this surge of warmth came up through with that ridge. But we've been able to get more Arctic blasts coming through this area, and as a result, we're going to question whether or not we can continue to see that northwest flow delivering this in the near term. So what's going on in the near term? Well, here's our jet stream today, and you can find the ridge. It's just right in through here. So you have kind of troughs flanking North America, and here's our larger ridge. Now, there is some southwest component to this flow, and you hear me say, we just need southwest flow, but the trough is there. It's here. I need that trough to be here generating southwest flow into this area. That would be what would open up the Gulf and revive this drought situation in the midsection of the United States. But as it stands, this is how our pattern is as we walk ourselves into this first full week of 2026. So Monday, January 5th, look at these temperatures under that ridge. Downslope flow, very dry, mild air. We're in the 60s and 70s, all the way, 60s possibly into South Dakota today. Now, we're cold in the corners. So look at the northeast and look at the west. And as we play it forward, this is Tuesday's highs, getting into Wednesday. I'm heading down to San Antonio. I'm going to pack shorts and t-shirt down here. It's going to be in the 80s. I'm going to talk at a cotton conference down there. And, sorry about that. And if we just keep going forward, this is Thursday's highs. Look at these temperatures pushing into the Ohio Valley, 60s and 70s here. Same thing for the Delta and the Mid-South. And then even across the northern tier. We're still very mild in this area, while there's cooler air as the trough works its way into the western states. By Saturday into Sunday, there's a shot at cooler air. I'll show you the system that's bringing it through, but you notice it's not sustained cold. And a lot of us are asking. I spent a lot of time staring at weather maps over my time off, I guess. But I kept asking the question, when does this pattern break? Is it mid-January or later? Are we getting phantom signals of what that break is? And are we going to continue to see this La Niña, which I honestly think has had more of a grip than I've given credit to on this pattern that we've seen as of late? So we saw that. Let's go here. So big questions about snow, all right? As we play it forward with all that mild air, I'm just going to watch to see if the southern edge of this erodes at all. This is current snowpack, so you can see those lake effect areas. Look at this. Huge amounts of lake effect. Northern woods of Wisconsin, Minnesota, great for snowmobiling. They've needed this. The last 2 winters have been terrible in this area, so they've really needed this. There's some places in the UP from that storm system before New Year's. They got 30 inches of snow and 70-mile-an-hour winds. It's been terrible there. But this is snow depth. We're going to watch it change. Now, the west, we're going to continue to add. You can just see the storm system coming into the west. We're already maxed out on the color bar, though. So that's just how it is. What we're going to see here is just watch if this mild air erodes the southern edge. And you can see, look at that in Pennsylvania, New York, southern Michigan. But as we work our way out toward Thursday into Friday, I'm watching this weekend this. Okay, when is it? This is Friday into Saturday. And there is a storm system that is trying to work its way into the central U.S. And if you've been paying attention to the weather models, well, today's forecast is putting the snow swath here. Over the weekend, it was way up here. At one point, it was through Illinois and Indiana. It's all over the place, which is why we're going to look at some ensemble averages in a few moments. But there is still chances to get brief interludes of colder weather. Just how long does it last? Because as we play it out there toward mid-month, we kind of melt a lot of that snow. All right, so this is kind of where we are in this pattern. So at 6 o'clock this morning, our all hazards map, winter weather advisory, from Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Several places of very dense fog. We're watching for some strong winds coming out of southern Colorado, New Mexico, and the panhandle of Texas and near Oklahoma. But in the west, flood watch is still out to the north. Winter storm warnings in the Sierra Nevada, and these stretch right up through the Cascades. So with all that being said, let's kind of get in and look at it. This is the high-res NAM at 6 a.m. this morning. As we play this forward, there's our next storm system coming into the west, while light snow spreads into the northeast. Why we're keeping an eye right in this area is there could be a mix of precipitation ahead of this weaker low riding the top of this ridge. And that mix could give us a little bit of an ice threat in this particular region, but most likely going to be rain farther to the south. Maybe, almost Madison south, I think, is a good call for this. Now, as that spreads east, the Pacific Northwest has another low that comes through, and we just keep an eye on the snows adding up here into the Cascades and Northern Rockies as the low that snuck its way across the upper Midwest pulls into the northeast by the time we get into Wednesday morning early. All right. Notice nothing coming through the midsection of the country under that larger ridge. So to see where this might go after it, I want to show you a couple of things. I always have these maps where I compare the GFS to the European. Well, during the time off I worked on building you all something new. I've been working on this for a while. We will be releasing this on agweather.com, but it's going to be a new forecasting system that looks something like this, okay? Now, let me just refresh it to show you how fast it loads. It's loading a bunch of frames, and right now I've only got the European model on here, but it's going to show you as time, what the weather systems look like. And the beauty of this is, you're going to be able to zoom in and see different things and click around and hover and see specific areas. And not only that, but I've thrown in a ton of weather variables. So you'll be able to look at any of these weather variables. Like, let's go have a look at snowfall. Let the maps reset here. And this is what the new European model is putting out in terms of snow. Now, this is just a test product. This is not operational yet. When I make it operational, I'll get it running on the website so you can all have access to it. But it's impressive, I think, in my opinion, just to be able to do this. And to be honest, Matt, Andrew, and I are building this in the hopes of turning it into an app for you. This is a much easier way to display weather data in an app. Now, what I'm really focused on here as I look at all of this is a couple of things. You now see there's a big storm system coming through the middle section of the country. Let's just go watch it again, okay? As I play this forward, okay, there's the one we just watched. That's now getting out there by Wednesday. Next storm system in the northwest. But right in through here, this is the one that's coming through on January 7th, 8th, and 9th. See it coming through the country, and on the backside, clearly enough cold air to give us another storm system that has snow on it. So there's a pair of them. All right, they're coming right through that area. Now, what I'm curious about is two things. You saw the snow map. We can go back and look at it again really quickly here. Snowfall. And this is what it's producing in terms of total snow. That's all the way out through the next 12 days. All right, so we're out there to 11 days. This is through the 16th. That's what the models are projecting. What I'm curious about is how much rainfall we're going to get out of this, and where is it? All right, so here's the newest ECMWF rainfall prediction. And look at that. The current run is trying through the Red River, getting through parts of the Arkansas River, then into the Missouri River and Mississippi, these areas, trying to put down a decent chance at some rain. And then right over parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, which have been very dry too, adding more. And these are some of these really dry areas where this storm system coming out of the west has a legitimate shot at hitting some of these areas. Now, I am a little concerned about severe weather, although I can't pin this down, but I want to show you CAPE. It's convective available potential energy. And what I'm keeping an eye on is you just start to see this buildup of CAPE in through here. Again, this is Thursday in this area, maybe again on Friday. We just have to keep an eye out for the risk of maybe some storms with this right in through this corridor. I don't I don't know. And it'll be interesting to see how far to the north they maybe get into Illinois and Indiana, but certainly farther through the Delta into the parts of southern Texas. We need to keep an eye out on this. But overall, there's a deep trough coming through there. And if we just take a step up in the atmosphere and go look at it, how about we go to height anomalies here? If I zoom out even, so you can kind of see I made a North America view, but soon we'll have the whole globe in this. But you can kind of play through and see what this storm system looks like. It's right there. The lead wave, this is kind of fun to watch. The lead wave is over New Mexico. It gets kicked out. When is that again? It's up here before Friday. And then the deeper wave comes in behind it right there and then barrels east. Now, what's really fascinating is if you let this go out even further to January 13th, 14th, 15th, I want to know if that thing shows up. Now, this is an operational run. This is just looking at one single European model run. But boy, if that thing shows up, that could be an interesting thing for the southern United States and then up the East Coast. But again, we're at mid-month here. Let's set this aside and just remember that I can't put a lot of trust in this just yet. All right, the other layers I want to show you here real quick. How about wind gusts? So this is max accumulated wind gusts here for the next 15 days. And again, you saw the high wind warnings in Montana. There they are right through here. So by the way, we can zoom in, just kind of get an idea. We're looking at the models putting down 70, maybe 80 mile an hour winds coming right off the mountains here. Pretty impressive wind event. By the way, if you don't like the way my numbers overlay, you can turn them on and off. So we're going to have this where you can take off the place values or the place labels or the value overlays if they overlap, and it's a bit distracting. But anyways, I just want to show you, let's zoom back out just a hair here. We are watching pretty strong winds with these next two systems coming out of the southern plains toward the Great Lakes in the northeast. All right, so just a new tool. Now, we will still have our static maps because a lot of folks love these and we're going to keep them around. But I want to point out, I just showed you the European model. The GFS doesn't agree. Ready? We've already seen through Tuesday into Wednesday. There's this system going through the northeast, the next one coming to the northwest. And that wave we're watching, the leading wave, is here Thursday morning. and it ejects by Thursday night into this region. Now that's pretty good agreement. Okay, that's lead wave. The second wave, the deeper one behind it, the GFS does not have this. See it? The Euro does, the GFS does not. And as a result, there's a much deeper low that rolls through the European model here that gets over Michigan, whereas the two systems are more separated in their vortmaxes in the GFS, and that's only by Saturday. So we're just looking at a 6-day forecast here. Okay. Now after that, we play it on forward and we get this. Do we return towards shots at colder air, more lake effect? I think we do, but this is approaching the 12th, 13th, 14th. We're going to have to see if any of these have any merit coming through this region as we watch through in the forecast. Okay, total snow though. I want to compare the models. That's the European. You'll be able to do this in my new system soon because you'll notice you can come up here, and if you wanted to, you can switch it to any of these models very soon. Okay, I got to build those out, but we'll get them in there for you. So this is the European. This is the AI. So European AI. Look at the difference in South Dakota, just as an example, or Minnesota between these two runs. Here's the GFS. So again, Euro and GFS. And finally, the blend of models. These are all 7-day forecasts. Notice that the blend washes this whole system out. Now, good snows, Great Lakes, Ontario into Quebec. We're still watching huge snows in the Cascades, Northern Rockies, and still another round of snow coming for the Sierra Nevada. That's been consistent in all the models. But probability-wise, the European model says that over the next 10 days, the chance of grabbing 3 inches in this corridor, again, mainly coming from this big system at the end of this week into the weekend, is, it's 20 to 40%. Now, 1-inch snow, you can kind of see it, bit bigger area. But 6 inches of snow, we're primarily confined to this part of the Great Lakes, Ontario, Quebec, interior of the Northeast, and then our western mountains. And that's the probability of 12 and 18. By the way, probability of 12. Again, 12 more inches possible. Possible. That's the key word here. And the UP is just incredible. All right, the other side of this, total precipitation. Now you can start to see how this is shaping up to continue the dryness in parts of the plains. Now, as you noted, with the European model forecast, we could be possibly bringing in better moisture here and here, 2 of our dry regions. But how far back to the west does it make it? The newest WPC keeps this whole region quite dry. And if you look at the European ensemble out 10 days on the chance of staying under 1/10 of an inch, my message when I get down to San Antonio is we are dealing with significant drought building, and over the next 10 to 15 days, there's not much relief. We've got to get the flow to turn around, but we have time. I know we don't want to deal with a winter drought, but we've got to get by end of January and February because they will start planting down here. Isn't that crazy to think? In February. It'll be warm enough to do that. I also don't want to ignore how dry it's been across the northern plains into the Canadian prairie here as well, and the forecast is showing up dry too. Same thing for the southeast. But on the chances of getting more than 1/2 of an inch, that's the 10-day chance at more than 1/2 inch of liquid equivalent. And here's the chance at more than 1 inch. And we need every bit of this possibility in this region. Okay? All right, from there, look at the pattern by the time we get to day 7. I mentioned a moment ago the differences in the spacing of the European versus the GFS. Look, European models has the trough here, day 7. GFS is way down there. That's the big difference. Now, as we play this forward, let's just take you out there to day 10. Most of the models are attempting to build this. You can see it there in the European ensemble. If I take you out to day 10 in the GFS, it's there as well. What will be important is to see the placement and size of this upper level trough to possibly deliver a storm system that rolls up the East Coast. That's what we're going to be patiently waiting for. Now, the issue with this is this could bring back in Arctic air into this area as we approach mid-month. Okay, you're on the backside of a trough. It'll be mild here. I'll put an M over it. But we'll have Arctic air, cold air possibly coming through this area if the pattern does, in fact, evolve into this. All right, so, but it's descending, coming over the top of a ridge. The ridge placement is over California, so it's coming in like that. It'll be dry. So the point here being the west is drier in that pattern because of the ridge. There will be clippers that come through, I think, in this direction. We've seen that already this winter. But are we going to get a storm system down here? Notice that the ensembles are not producing the storm system. That is going to be key to watch. In fact, the CPC is very dry. And I'm just telling you that if a trough dives into this area, And if it comes back closer to the delta than the southeast, then we're going to get a storm system to roll up the coast. And we just need to be watching out for that. And what's the time frame? Let's call it the 14th, 15th through the 19th or 20th. I think that would be the time frame over which I'd watch. All right, so where do we go beyond this? Well, over the next 15 days, I'm watching a few things. The placement of this ridge in the AI model. It's quite large into this area. And that will be influential on getting us back into something that looks like that northwest flow, which in winter is cold and clippered. But this is interesting as well, the very cold air that's over parts of Europe in the upper levels of the atmosphere, because let me show you the European temperatures. Next 5 days, they are very, very cold. And it's going to last, I think, for a while. The warm will start in Portugal and Spain, bleeding into parts of France, but much of Germany, all the way through Poland, over to Ukraine and Russia, very, very dry. Same thing with the Scandinavian countries here. Very, very dry. Very, very cold going forward in this forecast. Now, back in the U.S., there's our next 5 days. And day 5 through 10, we see that ridge opening. But the question is, can we get past the 15th, some colder air to come in through here? The models right now are not too excited about it. I'm just saying we need to watch the middle of the month and beyond for some chances of getting colder air back in here. Because anytime you build a large ridge, we have that shot. But I'm not going to argue against the consistency of the model right now and the fact there's still cold air planted in the Bering Sea, the Arctic, and parts of Alaska. So I'm kind of wish casting here for a bit of a change. It would help if the polar vortex would have a problem. Right now it's got a little bit of a push way over here in Russia against it, but it's still it's displaced a little bit, toward Europe, but it's a donut, and that means it's regained some of its strength. Forecast models are expecting it to strengthen temporarily and then weaken as we approach, again, sometime between the 11th and the 18th, which is that time frame I said, hey, if we're going to get cold air to come back out of Canada and hit us in the same way that it did here, all right, then this disruption could help. But overall, if we look at it, it's got to be a bit more than what I'm currently seeing forecast. Let me get you out there. There's the 8th, 9th, 10th. In fact, let's flip over to the 0Z run. There's the 11th and 12th. Yeah, I mean, perturbing the polar vortex here, sending the lobe there. This would be much better for cold if it was just here. If these colors were right in this area. So I don't know. I'm questioning my own kind of calling for a mid-January return of, just cold air doing that. All right. Okay, beyond this, let me show you the pattern. I love these diagrams. If you look at it, here is the path from the 4th, or yesterday. This is yesterday's run through the 10th, taking the troughs into this area. Oh, we've kind of seen that. We then watch the large ridge after the 10th, 11th, 12th rebuild here. Okay, I see that. And then this is the question. See this? This, I can kind of just outline this whole area. That's a lot of trough being predicted post mid-month here. And that's just maybe part of the thought process. I don't know. But that's why the models are doing this. This is through the next 2 weeks. Watch past mid-month. See how they're dropping that cold back in? So I just have to watch it, knowing that these models have not been too accurate, honestly. But is there a chance? I think there is. I think the second half of the month just sees more access to colder air in this area. That's the way I'd phrase it. Okay, precipitation-wise, if I look at a 30-day outlook, let's take you all the way out there to, I'm on the GFS, yeah, as far as the GFS can go. This is the 8th of January through the 8th of February. We're seeing a pretty active corridor here. The west is drier, or drier to the south. Does the European model agree with this? Here's the European extended. Yeah, it does. Big question mark is here. Does that fill in? So drier showing up in the pattern here for the west. There's a failure mode with this, just like we saw in December. That ridge, if it opens or flexes or splits, doesn't matter. What will replace it will be western U.S. troughs again. So we need to be watching for that carefully. All right, to finish all of this up, MJO, it is collapsed in a null space. It keeps kind of flexing out here into phases 6 or 7 in the forecast, but it's not high enough amplitude for me to just sink my teeth into it and say that it's, the main driver. So I'm going to have to watch this. What's going on with La Niña? My last video of 2025 focused on these 5 La Niñas in 6 years. What is the current La Niña doing right now? And if you have a look at it, this. So the newest zonal wind forecast across the equatorial Pacific shows this. Now, what is that? La Niñas are defined by strong easterly wind bursts. That's all they are. Everything else responds to that. Does that make sense? Okay, so it's a pressure pattern issue that drives a stronger trade wind. Whenever you see the forecast doing this, these are weaker trade winds, and even at times what we call westerly wind bursts. So the trade winds start to slow down, and sometimes even just reverse temporarily. And that would mark the end of a La Nina. So the new European model is saying, hey, if there was La Nina, you'd see these blue-greens occupying this area, and it's not. It's starting to shift. So that means the warm water that's been pushed here comes back. We redistribute temperature and pressure patterns across the planet, and the newest forecast right now shows that this was just released early this morning, that we've peaked in our La Nina, and we are expecting by the time we get into February, March to be fully ENSO neutral, crossing the line. And now if you look at it, here's half degree. We've got like 90% of the ensemble members by May and June in El Nino. And we've got questions as to the strength of this El Nino, and those questions can't be answered today. But I want to show you something very peculiar. Now, I've not analyzed this. This was literally released at 6 a.m. But here's the new forecast for January, February, March from the European model. I'm about to talk about it all week. Matt will pick it up too. January, February, March. This is February, March, April. I start to notice a couple things. These drier areas showing up in the forecast. This is now March, April, May. And this will be the critical time period. Are we going to be watching one of those seasons where most of our severe weather is focused in the Delta and not in the panhandles? Is there fewer storms here? What about the Southeast? I always look in March, April, and May at where the most focused storm activity is, because it gives us a clue as to what summer may bring in terms of drought pressure. But that's March, April, May. Here's April, May, June. I'm just going to show it to you. I literally just looked at these 10 minutes ago. Well, 20 minutes ago. That's May, June, July. Now, you know that you cannot trust this, but we're just observing what the model's saying. Okay, so you've seen it. We'll analyze it this week. Tomorrow, I'm going to do the forecast video on Tuesday. Matt will pick it up on Wednesday. We're going to swap days this week because of my travel and his travel for work. And I'm going to talk about an analog that I want to think through here. But to finish this, I better talk about South America, because over the last 7 days, we've seen a lot of rain coming to some key growing areas. I'm starting to get a bit concerned about this region and into Uruguay. It's been missed lately by some of the precipitation. And you can see in the last 30 days, we've been a bit drier here. You're going, what about this dryness? This doesn't matter. They can be drier than average here and still get adequate precipitation to grow a crop. But right in through here, including parts of Buenos Aires, not here, but here, getting in toward Cordoba, maybe up towards Santa Fe, has been a bit drier. I went and looked at these areas, and I picked out a spot near Cordoba, and this is kind of what we're talking about. If I can get this to load this morning. Oh, come on. Oh, shoot. Can you see it down here while this waits to load? I don't know what's going on with their website. But they're below average on precip. They've had a few events come through, but they are below average. Oh, do you need to make sure I'm a human before we do this? There we go. Sorry about that. Now it looks like their site is right now just not live for me. But my point is, we've been wetter over toward the capital. Okay, this is in Buenos Aires, the town, but drier into the interior. So what I was trying to point out to you is I'm a bit concerned about this little area right in through here. Now, is it a story? I don't think so, but it's something to be monitoring, because over the next 2 weeks, we continue to see that area drier in the European. Much wetter farther to the north, but drier in here. Just something to keep an eye on. They're going, oh, this isn't good, right? No, it's fine. Mid-January, if they start to dry out here, it's actually good for their soybean harvest efforts, which are about to start in earnest across Mato Grosso. And by the way, the GFS agrees. The question will be, how long does this dryness last? And is there anything changing with the way that this La Nina is giving up to make that dryness last as we get a safrinha crop in there? That's where the story might be, but right now it's not much of a weather story I think the markets will latch on to. All right, it was fun getting back in the groove of this. We'll talk to you again tomorrow morning. Thanks.